Okay, so we've got a couple of questions related to queue times and playing as a solo player. So, Jay McCoy on YouTube says, I've never played a game with a queue time before. So, with servers that have a queue to join, how does that work? Are the wait times long? And then Amisha on YouTube had a follow-up question to that, said, why do we have to wait? What do we have to wait for? I thought that this game can be played solo if we want. So, this is an always online game. This is a persistent online game, which means A, you need an internet connection to connect, and B, you're playing in on an online server. So the servers have to be up and you have to be logged onto the internet to play. It's not a single player game that you can download and play without an internet connection. Because it is a multiplayer game in the background, everything's running on that online space. So there is a um, there is a infographic and more information up on the Dune Awakening website and on their social media, which shows how all the server structure works. And I would urge people to go refer to that if they want intimate details of how all of this works. I'm just going to be giving a very high level um, breakdown of how queues work and everything else, so that you can kind of understand it. So essentially, there's a world server for your region. There are multiple regions, multiple world servers within each region. So for example, I am in the Carpathia region, the Carpathia world server for this beta, and then I am on the, I think it's Nabir Siege. So underneath each world server are a bunch of sieges. Each siege contains up to 40 players at any given time. And that is done that way so that we can go into these zones: Haga Basin South, Eastern Vermilius Gap, Western Vermilius Gap, all these different zones that you can explore on the map, right? Getting up in here into the Haga Rift, Jabal Ifrit, all these different places. So each siege can contain up to 40 players, and those 40 players are all playing on, think of it as an instanced version of the Dune Awakening world. And there are lots of different sieges where there are up to 40 players playing. All of those sieges are underneath a single world server, so you can group up with anybody from any siege at any point in time, as long as you are all underneath that same world server, which allows them to have instanced versions of all of these different zones without having A, overcrowding, and B, more importantly, since building is a huge aspect of this game, they want players to be able to find places to build their structures without other players having taken up all the real estate, and B, be able to have the game be performant and run without there being performance issues and hitching, because there's 5,000 bases being built in one space. So by having it be 40 player caps, we can have lots of players building structures, driving vehicles around, and everything else without it causing performance issues, because it would just get too much. There would be too much going on if we had thousands of players playing in the same space. So in this way, they've instanced the game using the sieges. How do the queues work? Well, if you try to log into a siege and there are more than 40 players playing on a siege, then you will be placed into a queue until such time as you can enter into until such time as there is less than 40 players in that siege, so that you can log into that siege. Now, how long are the queue times? That just depends. Like, how long are people playing for, so on and so forth. The chances of your siege being full are extremely, I would argue, next to nothing, because most people are going to be playing the way that this game is structured. Most people are playing this game single player in the exploration and storyline components of the game. They do multiplayer when they want to go do dungeons, or if they want to do PvP, which are optional side activities. So most people are logging into the game, playing on their siege. Maybe you have your 2-3 friends playing with you. You're all on the same siege. You all build buildings next to each other, and you guys can log in and play whenever you want. It only becomes an issue if there are lots of people coming to your siege. Like, what happens if a guild, like a big guild, and that's the other thing too. If you think about the way guilds have operated in other online games in the past, World of Warcraft can have 1,000 players in a guild. That's not the case here. The guild cap in this game is 32 players, if I'm not mistaken. Please don't quote me on that. I'm almost like 90% sure it's 32 players. And the reason they have the cap set at 32 players is that you can have a guild of players on one siege, 32 players, and still have room on a siege for non-guilded players to come beyond that one siege. So having players play on the sieges, then you go to the trading posts and the social hubs like Arakeen and etc., where more players come together and they share that space together. And then they exit those spaces and go back to their individual sieges. Then there's the Deep Desert, which is a shared environment where there's hundreds of players coming together in one space because it's the big open-end PvP zone at the end of the game, which is not related to the storyline. Hang on, guys. I have the sniffles. Hopefully I muted myself for that. So I've not ran into any queues at all, and I've been playing, I don't know, roughly a year at this point between closed beta, the beta weekend that we're doing now, the beta event in April. I've never run into this issue, but we're not dealing with a live game yet. So when the live game goes out, you end up getting millions of players, and there will probably be queue times from time to time. In many other games like World of Warcraft, EverQuest 2, Star Wars: New Republic, Lord of the Rings Online, queue times have always varied because those games do things differently. You might have a queue time of 10 minutes, you might have a queue time of 5 hours. And the 5-hour queue times are usually only when the game is first launched and there's everybody trying to get in at the same time. World of Warcraft instances their zones that way and does layers. Instead of doing layers here, they're doing individual sieges. So, the reason why they do the sieges, as I explained, is to control the population and to make sure that there's not an over saturation of buildings and vehicles that are driving performance down. There was another part of that question though. Amisha said, I thought we could play this game solo if we want. You absolutely can, but you are playing an online game in an online space where there are other players also accessing that place at the same time. So it's not a single player RPG. So the infrastructure that you're playing on is a multiplayer infrastructure. So you can log in and play solo, but you're still playing in an environment where there are other players. You might not necessarily see them. As an example, yesterday we drove back to the starting zone, Haga Basin South, and when I played there on Friday, there was not a lot of other structures. When I went back yesterday on Saturday, we ran across like 20 different bases because there were players who had built up structures there. And I've run across probably, I think, 10 or 12 players at this point. Because I'm on my siege. I don't know where the other players are on my siege because they're off doing different adventures, and there's a bunch of different zones that they could be exploring in, and a bunch of different areas. But just like last night, I was recording one of my Mentat videos. I think it was the one I published last night. Why the Mentat is my favorite class. That video, I was in my house, and another player rode up on their bike while I was recording my video. We ran outside and like shot our gun into the sky to fuck with them. There's no PvP, but in that area. But it was just fun to see their reaction. So that is how queue times work. If you go to log into the game and your queue has more than 40 players, you will be placed in the queue until such time as there is 39 players, and then you will get to log in as the 40th player. But that assumes that there's 40 people on your siege. They have created, basically they're spinning up instances. The sieges are instances, so there are hundreds for each world region. I don't know, hundreds, thousands. I don't know the limitation on how many they can spawn. But there's all of these sieges in place so that overcrowding should not be an issue. There may be queue times. I would argue that there's probably going to be queue times at launch because there's always queue times at launch for games. But those always go down within the first 3 days because people start to spread out from the starter zones and go off and do other things, and maybe they decide they're going to join their friends in a different region. Um, yeah, that's a very high level view of how queue times work. The chances of you running into queues because of overcrowding are probably only going to happen if a guild decides, like a big guild decides that they're going to be on your siege. Um, if that happens, then they can have up to 32 players. But the cool thing is that the way that Funcom has structured guilds and the Surger sieges is 32 players is the cap. So even if a guild was to form on your server, there's still room for 8 other players, not server, sorry, on your siege. There's still 8 spaces left on a siege, even if a guild has formed on that server. Oh shit, I'm running out of water while I'm standing here talking. That is not good. We are not in a protected space. I need to stop yapping and get back to it, otherwise we're gonna dehydrate. Anyway, that is a top-down, high-level view of queues and how they work. Like, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Daily streams at around 5 a.m. Central on YouTube and Twitch. Jay says, if you change the server, do you have to start your character from scratch again? Yes, you do. You do absolutely have to start over from scratch if you switch sieges. You can't move characters from one siege to another. At least not at this time. I don't know if they're going to offer some sort of paid siege transfer server. Most games do, but I don't know if they are going to. That remains to be seen. But you can only have one character per. I believe it's per. Don't quote me on this. I think it's one player per server. Not one. I don't think you can create another player on a siege within the same server. I could be wrong on that.